Okay, so accepted the live stream request.
Welcome everyone to the ExploreMedTech Innovation Seminar. My name is Mary Susan Thompson, and I am one of the program managers for the MedTech Talent Accelerator program. During the seminar, please keep your mics mute and videos off. Please feel free to put your questions in the chat anytime. Let me do a land acknowledgement. Toronto is in the dish with one spoon territory. The dish with one spoon is a treaty between the Anishinaabe, Mississaugas, and Haudenosaunee that bound them to share the territory and protect their land. Subsequent indigenous nations and peoples, Europeans, and all newcomers have been invited into this treaty in the spirit of peace, friendship, and respect. Please join me in welcoming our esteemed speaker for today, Mauricio Rodriguez. He is the founder of Erlangen Incorporated. Mauricio holds a master's degree in quality systems engineering from Concordia University in Montreal and is an Ontario professional engineer active in the medical devices industry for over 15 years on quality management systems, FDA remediation, post-market surveillance, design controls, risk management, and the implementation of pivotal CAPA activities for high-risk medical devices. Prior to starting Erlangen Incorporated, Mauricio worked in various quality and regulatory roles for major medical devices companies. Thank you for accepting our invitation and excited to hear from you. Over to you, Mauricio. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary, for the introduction, and welcome everyone to today's webinar, Revolutionizing Medical Device CAPA, Accelerating Improvement and Efficiency. Thank you for the introduction. I'll speak a little about Erlangen. We're a boutique consulting firm dedicated to providing expert guidance and personalized solutions to companies in the healthcare industry. With many years of experience and a deep understanding of the regulatory landscape, our team or seasoned professional has helped numerous clients bring innovative medical devices to market. From concept to commercialization, we offer a full suite of services, including marketing, research, product development, regulatory affairs, and quality management. Our commitment to excellence and unparalleled customer service has made us a trusted partner to organizations of all sizes. So thank you for that. Let's get started with our objectives for the session. The objective of this webinar is to provide an overview of the CAPA process. We will provide some insight on the purpose of the CAPA system, the regulatory and procedural requirements. We will also explain the steps of the CAPA process. And lastly, we will present the new Make CAPA Cool framework from the Medical Device Innovation Consortium. All right, so just to break the ice and to get a sense of and feedback from our webinar attendees, please use the chat to respond to this question. Why do we do CAPAs? So this is even before we, for some of you that have never heard the term or that never worked in the industry with CAPAs, let's get a sense of what you understand from the process and the term CAPA. So please go ahead and just type your responses in the chat. We'll just go through them quickly, and then we'll jump right into the answer. So just 10 seconds, please. Just gonna pull up the chat. All right. I see a C coming in. So let's read what C is. C, we want to eliminate the real cause of the problem, and that's correct. But also there's a few other here that are correct. All except B, right? My manager assigned me the task. Well, that's not necessarily the right answer. But all of these A, C, and D are actually good responses. So CAPA is a regulatory requirement. We want to eliminate the real cause of the problem, that's true. And we want to be able to have a well documented a story so others know what we need to fix the issues. So with that, let's move on to our next slide, the purpose of the CAPA process. So our first objective is to discuss the purpose of the CAPA process. So for those of you familiar with the CAPA process, this is something that you may have seen numerous times. For those of you new to the CAPA process, here are the requirements and reasons why we do CAPA in medical devices per the regulator's perspective. So the corrective and preventive action CAPA process in medical devices is a systematic approach to investigating, addressing, and preventing the recurrence of issues. It involves identifying the causes of nonconformities or deviations, implementing corrective actions to prevent recurrence, and preventive actions to deter future occurrences. That's the term CAPA, C-A-P-A, corrective action, preventive action. Therefore, ensuring compliance with industry regulations and maintaining high standards of product safety and efficacy. CAPA is essential for continuous improvement in the quality management systems of medical devices manufacturing, and CAPA is often seen as the heart of the quality management system, as we're depicting in this diagram here. So what is the purpose of the CAPA system? A good quality management system in medical devices requires a CAPA process that will collect and analyze information, identify and investigate product and quality issues, take appropriate and effective corrective and preventive actions, which will ensure the issue will not recur, and will also prevent the problem from occurring on similar products and processes. And the information collected through the CAPA system is typically shared with management through the management review process, which is a sub-process in the quality management system of medical devices. Our second objective is to provide an overview of the regulatory requirements of the CAPA process. Medical device companies are regulated by a variety of regulatory bodies. The United States Food and Drug Administration, or FDA, requires medical device companies to follow the quality system regulations in 21 CFR 820. The European Union and other regulatory bodies around the world require compliance to ISO standard 13485. Let's start with the USDA regulation. The USDA regulation for CAPA indicates that manufacturers shall establish and maintain procedures for implementing corrective and preventive actions. The CAPA requirements are outlined in the 21 CFR 820 subpart J. This regulation is often considered the golden standard for CAPA. There is a lot of information that manufacturers use to build their processes in their quality management systems. So let's go through those requirements, requirement 1 through 6. For the FDA regulation, manufacturers are required also to analyze sources of quality data, such as processes, manufacturing records, quality audit reports, complaints, and return product to identify the existing potential causes of non-conforming product or other quality problems. Manufacturers are required to use appropriate statistical methodology where necessary to detect recurring quality problems. Requirements 2 through 5, the FDA regulations require medical device companies to have procedures that include requirements for investigating the cause of nonconformities relating to product process and the quality system, identifying the actions needed to correct and prevent recurrence, verify or validating the corrective and preventive actions to ensure that they are effective and do not adversely affect the finished device. Companies are also required to implement and record the changes in methods and procedures needed to correct and prevent identified quality problems. Requirements 6 through 7. To comply with the FDA regulations, medical device companies are also required to ensure that the information related to quality problems is disseminated to those directly responsible for assuring the quality of such product or the prevention of such problems, and also submit relevant information on identified quality problems as well as corrective and preventive actions for management review. It is very important to keep in mind that all the activities must be well documented. Now, let's discuss the ISO 13485 quality management system requirements. The ISO standard provides a slightly different approach with similar outcomes. Section 8.5 of the ISO standard requires include requirements for improvement of the quality system. It indicates manufacturers shall identify and implement any changes necessary to ensure and maintain the continued suitability and effectiveness of the quality management system through the use of the quality policy, quality objectives, audit results, analysis of data, corrective and preventive actions, or CAPA, and management review. So corrective and preventive action process plays an important role in maintaining a healthy quality management system. Let's look at the requirements of the corrective action portion, the CA portion per ISO 13485. So companies that follow the ISO standard are required to implement corrective actions to eliminate the cause of nonconformities in order to prevent recurrence. And you'll see that there is a few definitions that people working in the CAPA process have to know well. One of them that we've been mentioning often is nonconformity and recurrence, right? So a nonconformity has already occurred. It's an issue that has occurred, and CAPA, or the CA, the corrective action, is executed to prevent the recurrence of that nonconformity. Like the FDA standard requires that procedures be developed to define requirements for, I'm going to list them here, reviewing nonconformities, including complaints, determining the causes of nonconformities, evaluating the need for action to ensure that nonconformities do not recur, planning and documenting action needed, and implementing such action, including as appropriate, updating documentation, verifying that the corrective action does not adversely affect the ability to meet applicable regulatory requirements or the safety and performance of the medical device, and reviewing the effectiveness of corrective action taken. And you'll see there's a few that resemble very much the FDA requirements. So in a way, these two complement each other. And many companies, depending on where their products are in the field, have to use both of the regulatory standards and the requirements. Now let's look at preventive action per ISO 13485. So the ISO standard includes a separate section for preventive action, where it also requires that the manufacturing companies determine the action needed to eliminate the causes of potential nonconformity, so issues not having happened yet, in order to prevent occurrence. Procedures must define requirements for, I'm going to list them here, determining potential nonconformities and their causes, evaluating the need for action to prevent occurrence of the nonconformities, planning and documenting action needed and implementing such action, including as appropriate updating documentation, verifying that the action does not adversely affect the ability to meet applicable regulatory requirements or the safety and performance of the medical device, and reviewing the effectiveness of the preventive action taken as appropriate. Now, let's discuss the different steps of the CAPA process. One important note here is that the CAPA system should address not only product issues, but also quality issues related to processes and the quality subsystems of the of the quality management system. Okay, let's have a look at what it's considered the traditional CAPA process and what companies are used to do up until very recently. As an input to the CAPA process, we have the other quality management subsystems that monitor product and processes. These are called usually the feeders into the CAPA system. This is the first step of the process. When a nonconformity is discovered, the next step is to analyze the available data and generate a problem statement. Corrections must be identified as early as possible to ensure containment of the issue. For example, if there is product in the field, we need to be able to do an action to recall or take that problem from the hands of the users in order to avoid harm. After this, an investigation should be conducted to determine root cause. From here, corrective and preventive actions are identified. You should always compare your action plan with the original root causes to verify that these actions will address the nonconformity. After the actions are implemented, the effectiveness of these actions should be verified to ensure there is no recurrence of the nonconformity. This is what companies have done Up to this point, and with all the background that I presented on regulatory requirements, companies have to make sure that they incorporate all the requirements of the regulations. Okay, so far we have reviewed and identified the regulatory requirements and high-level description of the traditional CAPA process. There is not only one recipe to implement these requirements by manufacturers. Each manufacturer will implement the requirements according to their established quality management system, their culture, and many other factors. Let's have a look now at the most recent initiative by the industry to modernize the CAPA process called the Make CAPA Cool framework. So what is the CAPA challenge with the traditional process? So here are some of the challenges that push the industry to overhaul the CAPA system. One of them, for example, was the discovery by Medtronic, one of the major players in the industry, of the substantial cost attributed to the corrective and preventive action CAPA processes. With their assessment, they identified that even amounts going up to $150 million per year were necessary to manage this process. This figure was based on the number of CAPAs that were written and the amount of time that it takes to address a CAPA. The calculation did not incorporate things like validation work and the cost of the validation product that they have to do as part of their CAPA system. It's simply the number is the time, is the number and the hours spent, which amounts to 150 million. So there's definitely like a lot of more money that is going into this, into executing this process. Now, CAPA is sometimes viewed as a monster process in the industry. Engineers' passion for problem solving and product improvement often contrasts with their aversion to the compliance-heavy one-size-fits-all CAPA process or the traditional process. This is why the Make CAPA Cool initiative was born from this realization to reframe CAPA not as a burdensome regulatory requirement, but as an integral part of continuous learning and quality enhancement. So how is the traditional CAPA redefined? This slide details the goals set by the Make CAPA Cool initiative, which include reducing patient risk and making CAPA processes more effective while lessening the overall burden, introducing a new CAPA framework that moves away from a one-size-fits-all approach, emphasizing a tailored effort based on risk management. And here's the key word. So risk management is what makes everything different. This transformation is aimed at focusing on significant issues that directly impact patient safety and product quality, thus streamlining processes and enhancing overall efficiency. So in response to the MDIC's Medical Device Innovation Consortium Case for Quality Collaborative Community, they just didn't listen to what the pains of the industry. They acted, and they assembled a global coalition which aimed for a CAPA process that encouraged swift continuous improvement, shifting focus from mere documentation for compliance to genuine problem solving. Not just a procedural tweak, but reimagining the CAPA role, making it a tool that not just effectively and efficiently resolves issues, but empowering those people that it is designed to serve. So the risk framework, right? The risk approach is kind of the key takeaway from our previous two slides. Another key piece of the Make CAPA Cool framework is a process enhancement tool that the group calls pure preventative action. So pure preventative action is highlighted as a strategy for proactively addressing issues before they escalate to CAPA level problems. This will be explained as an innovative approach within the quality management system, allowing organizations to implement quality improvements without the complexities of traditional CAPA processes. So if you have ever worked with CAPAs in the medical device industry, CAPA, of course, is made up of corrective action and preventive action, but very often companies usually focus on the corrective action part and not so much on the preventive action part. And these are sometimes sightings and findings from auditors when they audit quality management system of medical device companies. It makes sense that it is easier to try to address an issue that already occurred rather than trying to solve a potential issue that hasn't yet occurred. So preventive action means, of course, the problem has never occurred before. And if you have ever tried to do a preventative CAPA, you know that you can't really assess the risk. And you can't really do an effectiveness check because it's very complicated. So firms, they usually struggle with that, right? Like the effectiveness check of a CAPA, as we saw in the step-by-step process breakdown, you have to demonstrate that your CAPA has been able to effectively eliminate the root cause of the problem. When you're doing a preventive action, as in the PA section, a part of the CAPA, it's really hard to come up with an effectiveness plan to demonstrate that the issue that hasn't even occurred is going to be effectively resolved by the exercise that you're doing. So with pure preventive action, now companies are taking that action that never happened before, and basically we're saying, and the MDIC framework is saying, organizations, you're free to literally do this as part of your quality improvement project. There's a lot to drive to, and there is a lot to drive to that. Especially think about design, or when you're building a piece of equipment for a process, or you go out there and proactively look at your process and say, if you want to prevent a CAPA in the future, how would I do that? Well, now you can do that and this will be defined as a pure preventative action without being nervous that the FDA is going to come to you and say, well, you didn't put that in the CAPA process. So you start, this is a good example of the shifting mindset, right? From just merely compliance to actually creating a culture of quality improvement, right? So this is a good example, just like if you have your initiative to do a preventive action and basically correct something that you think will improve the quality of your processes or product, you have to go through a very heavily regulated process called the CAPA process, right? So, many people would shy away from that. It's like if it wasn't very well documented as per the regulation requirements, that would eventually end up in being cited or an issue or getting a non-conformances from auditors. So another thing is that firms, companies now they will just document those pure preventative actions in their quality system, not necessarily on the CAPA records. There is many sub processes of the quality management system, so you don't necessarily have to go to the CAPA system to document those continuous improvement initiatives. When you make a change, you still have to go through the effectiveness checks and the verifications as required, but you wouldn't have to go through the CAPA process to do that. So, and the more you do preventative action, the less potential there will be for a CAPA. The MDIC has already published its final 57-page white paper on May 2nd, 2023. The future steps include revising the FDA's quality system inspection technique, also referred as the QSIT, and rolling out the framework to manufacturers, emphasizing the shift towards proactive rather than reactive quality management. So QSIT, for those of you who are not familiar, this is a tool from the FDA to audit quality management system processes, and there is one specific for CAPA. Of course, by changing the approach and the mindset, it's just obvious that the approach to auditing the process is going to have to change. So that tool that is often used by FDA auditors is going to have to be redefined to reflect the changes in the CAPA process. So this white paper is the result of a collaborative effort of the Medical Device Innovation Consortium, the medical device industry, strategy consultants, and the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. It brings together their perspectives and cultural and procedural best practices across various industries to highlight the corrective and preventive action process as a continuous improvement process and to design a less burdensome process that drives higher product quality and improves patient safety. All right, so let's go through a few of the highlights of the Make CAPA Cool framework. It was initiated in response to the cry of engineers everywhere within the medical device industry, whom, if asked what they like most about their jobs, would point to solving problems and driving product improvements. But what do they like the least? Well, they will tell you that it's the CAPA process. Today's CAPA process has become highly focused on compliance, many manufacturers taking a one-size-fits-all approach. And what's worse, the fear of findings by regulatory bodies lead companies to spend an outsized amount of time on paperwork, regardless of identified product and process risk levels, often slowing down the implementation of improvements. So if you haven't, or if you're not in the industry yet, or if you're planning, of course, to be part of the industry as an engineer or as a quality, as a specialist of any sort, you'll be faced to the CAPA process. It's something that everybody does in a medical device company, and it very often it's very intimidating because it's heavily documentation is heavy and regulatory requirements are heavy. So this is basically the mind shift paradigm. It's trying to make it serve for what it was intended to, which is mostly basically process and quality, process and product continuous improvement. So let's have a look at that CAPA process improvement from the FDA perspective. So the goal of the CAPA improvement approach is to define a process that drives the problem-solving culture, higher product quality, and enhance patient safety. Today's process is heavily compliance focused, and it adds limited value to the organization. Regulators and auditors have indirectly influenced the culture, but by not redirecting or realigning expectations. As a risk-based approach allows an organization to prioritize issues and solve them according to the risk profile, enabling organizations to address more issues over time, resulting in high-quality products for patients. So in this slide, I want to make a slight setback and provide a summary of what the team learned during its benchmarking activities. To capture best practices, the NDIC interviewed different quality operation experts from automotive, aerospace, high-tech software, and financial service companies. These companies are considered to be among their industry's leader in quality. They use structured interviews to identify common themes across all 10 of these organizations. These themes then shape their thinking as they develop the proposed risk-based improvement framework. The high-level themes are listed here. First, don't assign equal importance to all issues. When everything is important, nothing is. It is important to focus quality practices on protecting customers, which for us would be the patient. By doing this, it can also help with the third bullet, which is to promote alignment among key stakeholders and senior leaders on what is important in order to facilitate resource and priority assignments. The fourth theme is to apply a risk-based approach to problem solving so that not all problems are treated the same. Finally, to address internal issues at the lowest possible level at which they can be resolved in the fastest time without unnecessary burden, and then escalated as needed. The goal is to open up problem solving to all levels of the organization, keeping it as close as possible to the related work versus limiting problem solving to just those resources who are experienced with the compliance documentations. These insights resulted in a number of deliberately designed elements within the framework. So what is the proposed framework? Before digging into the details for the framework, I will be providing a high-level overview of its construct. So the proposed CAPA framework can be separated into main flows. So let's look at the top arrow, external issues, which consist of products in the field that are products outside of the control of the organization. And high-risk trends are addressed with a more traditional CAPA approach. So you saw back in a few slides our depiction of the traditional CAPA process. Whereas internal events or products within the control of the organization, the arrow below, and low-risk trends can be addressed using a fast-track CAPA path, which allows for reduced cost documentation and simplified effectiveness check. The goal of this fast-track CAPA process is to move away from heavy documentation and to put the focus on the actual problem solving. Now, this is the framework in more detail. So to dig in a little more in more detail, we'll be using this depiction of the framework. The external events are highlighted in the dark top blue boxes, whereas the internal events are at the bottom in the lighter blue boxes. To start our explanation with the darker blue boxes, all external events that are outside organizational control are first reviewed to see if there is a potential patient or user impact. All those with potential patient or user impact, then we say, okay, let's complete a risk assessment using the organization's existing risk assessment process. So here, there is an international standard that is well established within medical device industry, is the ISO 14971, and companies are expected to have a risk management framework in their quality management system. So issues with unacceptable risks are then escalated to an external CAPA, or the more traditional CAPA process used today. The internal events, those within an organization's control, are split into two different flows. So those are the light blue boxes on the bottom. Trends are first checked to verify. Let's have a look at the first flow. Trends are first checked to verify no product is escaped. If so, they are assessed using the top flow. If not, they are similarly assessed for risk using the existing risk assessment process with high-risk trends being escalated to the external CAPA and medium to low-risk trends being addressed in what we're calling a fast-track CAPA, which will be explained next. So this is the first time we introduce this concept, the fast-track CAPA. So non-trends that have not escaped are assessed for risks, and issues with an acceptable risk are then addressed using the fast-track CAPA with reduced cost documentation and a simplified effectiveness check. You notice the dark blue box in the lower right corner of the screen. This captures the ability of any organization to escalate an issue to an external CAPA or fast-track CAPA at the company's discretion, even when not asked for by the framework. So what's new in the proposed framework? I'll be providing an overview of the key difference between the more traditional external CAPA and the fast-track CAPA process. But before I dig in, though, I want to mention a key difference not captured on this slide. This difference is that the external CAPAs are documented within a standalone CAPA record, whereas the fast-track CAPA can leverage other QMS processes to capture the work. The remaining key differences are in team composition, cost analysis, and effectiveness check. So to start in team composition, the external CAPA involves a cross-functional team with a broader understanding of the system, whereas the fast-track CAPA involves only those directly responsible for the process and for doing the work. For the cost analysis, there is a difference in documentation requirements. The external CAPA requires the root cause methodology and the actual thought process to be documented within the CAPA record. The fast-track CAPA only requires the cause be documented. So there's a big difference between a root cause and just a cause. Does that not require that the thought process or problem-solving methodology be documented? But it should be noted, though, that this is not to encourage less rigor, but to shift the focus from compliance to continuous improvement at all levels of the organization. So leverage more intuitive and accessible problem-solving approaches like, for example, the DMIC from the Six Sigma framework or the Plan, Do, Check, Act PDCA. Only the identified costs will be captured in the existing quality management system record. Now, for the effectiveness check, the external CAPA requires a specially designed targeted effectiveness check focused on the root cause, whereas the fast-track CAPA can leverage in-process monitoring to identify a recurrence and potential escalation to the trend path. For example, if a problem occurs, the organization can investigate further for a different cause, and this should lead to incremental improvement, even if it does not remove the low-risk problem initially. It should be noted that this proposal would encourage the development of a strong monitoring and control system at our organization. Just to summarize, external CAPA process or the traditional CAPA process, it's a very stringent process that requires a lot of documentation. It requires to document the thought process. It requires to identify the root cause of the problem through systematic methods. Fast track is not as stringent. The documentation can be done in separate subsystems of the quality management system, and you need to identify a cause. even if that cause, if eliminating or acting on that cause doesn't eliminate completely the low risk issue, then there is an iterative process in which you can, if the process resurfaces, then you can try to identify another cause until you eventually eliminate it. But having in mind that being a low risk issue, you're not impacting ultimately the patient. Okay, so this is very key. It's the considerations of this change of our process during an audit, right? Like, so the industry and the consortium, they teamed up with auditing organizations and regulators and notified bodies like BSI, of course, the FDA, and many others, because everybody has to be on board and aligned to this, right? Like you change, if you as an organization decide to change your CAPA process from the traditional method to the new Make CAPA Cool framework, where you're expecting that your auditor will know what's going on, and you know, you don't end up with a lot of non-conformities and sightings that would require that you do a lot of actions to remediate. So as auditors and investigators of an organization quality management system, the vision in developing the framework has been to encourage a dynamic and risk-based approach geared towards problem solving. So there was no intent to change the requirements from the standard ISO 13485 or the US Quality System Regulation 21 CFR Part 820, the one that we saw at the beginning of the presentation. Both remain applicable to a corrective and preventive action process through either workflow of this framework. It could be traditional workflow or the fast track workflow. The requirements on corrective and preventive actions include reviewing and investigating problems, like we saw, identifying their cause, determining the need for action, planning, documenting, and implementing these actions, verifying their impact on the rest of the quality management system and on products, and their effectiveness in recording these activities. All these requirements will again remain applicable regardless of the CAPA workflow implemented according to the framework. However, that to which these requirements apply can be tailored to the level of risk or complexity of the problems to solve. This risk-based approach is explicitly encouraged, if not required, in ISO 13485 and the US regulation. So for example, going into a little more detail, 13485 in its clause 4.1.2 states that the organization shall apply a risk-based approach to the control of the appropriate processes needed for the quality management system. Now, the US preamble, the preamble of the US Quality System Regulation clarifies the intent of that regulation. It states in topic 159 that the FDA agrees that the degree of corrective and preventive actions taken to eliminate or minimize actual or potential nonconformities must be appropriate to the magnitude of the problem and commensurate with the risk encountered. It also states that FDA does expect the manufacturer to develop procedures for assessing the risks, the actions that need to be taken for different levels of risk, and how to correct and prevent problems from recurring depending on the risk assessment. Let me just digress here for a moment to remind everyone that the term risk management and risk-based approach are not synonyms. The risk management is a requirement in both the US Quality System Regulation and ISO 13485 for a formal documented process by which a manufacturer must identify, analyze, and reduce risks applicable to a medical device throughout its entire life cycle, meaning by design, through its production, processes, storage, shipping, installation, use, and disposition. The US Quality System Regulation actually calls it risk analysis, but again, the explanation given in the preamble, now on topic 83, confirms that the requirement is for what now is called risk management in the sense of ISO 14971. So in contrast, a risk-based approach, right, not a risk-based risk management framework, or risk, in our context, in this particular context, applies to a process and not the product. So to tailor the control over this process, the level of risks of deficiencies or inconsistencies in implementing this process would represent. However, not necessarily as formal as the risk management process, a risk-based process may leverage some outputs of the risk management process, of course, where available, For example, when triaging individual issues based on their associated risks. It may, however, not be the only way to qualify the levels of risk applicable to a particular issue. So basically what, in fewer words, what we're trying to say here is that the company, they can now leverage the risk management process, which is like a standalone process and a requirement of the regulations. And it can use a risk-based approach based on the risk management process in order to triage when the issues, in order to determine like when to use the traditional CAPA process and the fast track and CAPA process workflow. So issues that are reported by patients or users that affect the conformity of devices that have left control of the organization or that represent high-risk trends events will deserve the highest attention, of course, and be processed through the standard known external CAPA workflow, which some may still qualify or name as the traditional CAPA work process. It will typically represent a focused cross-functional effort that includes a fully documented root cause analysis, action plan, and a statistical valid verification of the actions and effectiveness. Other internal, both trending or non-trending, that remain in the organization's control will follow the fast track CAPA workflow that may be processed leveraging other processes as applicable or relevant, like the non-conformity handling process. They can be addressed as a design change through the change control process, through internal audits, through complaints management, or even through the risk management process. So those records should therefore include, proportionate to the risk and complexity, the evidence that the requirements applicable to corrective or preventive actions were met. Neither 13485 nor the US quality system regulation prevent issues from being addressed using distinct workflows, not leveraging other quality management system processes, providing the requirements applicable to those actions are met. As a result, it's possible that there will be not a single consolidated list of all corrective and preventive actions, but multiple ones. You would have to ask maybe more specifically for a particular list or for a list of CAPAs. So usually when auditors, regulators come in to audit a site and they start asking for the records of CAPA, it's systems, repository systems where those CAPAs live. There's lists that are extracted and they're presented to the auditor so that they can go through. With the new framework, CAPA records, which are the ones that will be maintaining the more traditional CAPAs, will be readily available, but there's going to be fast track CAPAs that are going to live in the other different subsystems of the quality management system. And so the manufacturer has to find a way to provide those to the auditors in order to complete the inspection of the sites. So yeah, this is a bit heavy, but it is important to bring it up because it is the success of the implementation of this framework, right? That all the parties are involved are aligned and up to date to the changes. So a few more considerations. The framework assumes that the organization has a mature monitoring and trending capability, right? Because many of the risk decisions will end up in this issue, even being a low risk, we will not necessarily address it at this point, and we'll just continue monitoring. So there has to be maturity on the trending and monitoring. When the framework suggests to track and trend, it means that they really must, manufacturers must really have the ability to detect when there are recurring issues, right? To really measure the significance of the problem if it actually becomes a problem. And so just to challenge whether the organization has actually that approach and capabilities to detect those recurring events is going to become something of high focus for the auditors. It's important to keep in mind that the recurrence of lower risk issues it cannot be interpreted as a failure of the quality management system. However, if the problem persists, the organization should make an effort to identify other possible causes and solutions. So when reviewing the fitness of the quality management system to meet the requirements, in particular, as part of the management review, the organization is expected to consider all issues and corrective actions from both external and fast track workflows. Finally, to close out this presentation, we'd like to provide you with a link to the white paper for those of you who are interested in more details. Also, we would like to let you know that in collaboration with the MedTech Talent Accelerator Program, we will be hosting our 4-day CAPA Excellence Bootcamp from June 11th to the 14th from 1 to 5 p.m. More details regarding participation on this bootcamp will be communicated by the MedTech Talent Accelerator Program in a future communication. Now I think let's open the floor for questions.